Welcome to Talk Smart English. Some stories change the world. This is one of them. You are about to read the life story of Adolf Hitler, from a poor artist with big dreams to the leader who started the biggest war in history. This is not a story with a happy ending. It is dark, serious, and true. But it is one of the most important stories you can learn. Why is this story important? There is a famous saying, "Those who forget the past will repeat it." This story teaches us what can happen when people choose the wrong leaders. It shows how fear and anger can destroy freedom. It reminds us to protect what is good and fight against what is wrong. This is not fun reading. It is powerful reading. You will learn history and English at the same time. You will see how small choices can lead to big disasters. And you will understand why the world today works the way it does. Ready to begin? Take your time. Think about what you read. And remember, learning English means learning about the world. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small town on the Austrian-German border. He was the fourth of 6 children born to Alois Hitler and Clara Pilzel. His father, Alois, was a customs official who had changed his surname from Schicklgruber to Hitler in 1876. Alois was known for being strict and authoritarian, while Hitler's mother, Clara, was described as a gentle and devoted woman who doted on her son. Hitler's childhood was marked by family tragedy. Several of his siblings died in infancy or early childhood, leaving Adolf and his younger sister Paula as the only surviving children. The relationship between Adolf and his father was troubled. Alois expected his son to follow in his footsteps and pursue a career in the civil service. But young Adolf had different aspirations. From an early age, Hitler showed an interest in art and dreamed of becoming a painter. This ambition put him at odds with his father, who viewed such pursuits as impractical and frivolous. The conflict between father and son created tension in the household. When Alois died in 1903, 13-year-old Adolf felt a sense of relief, though he would later express some regret about their difficult relationship. Hitler's academic performance was mediocre at best. While he showed some talent in certain subjects, particularly history and art, he struggled with discipline and lacked motivation for formal education. He attended several schools in Linz and Steyr, but never completed his secondary education, leaving school at age 16 without a diploma. After his father's death, Hitler's mother indulged his artistic interests. In 1907, at age 18, Hitler moved to Vienna, Austria's capital, hoping to pursue his dream of attending the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts. However, he was rejected twice by the Academy, which deemed his work inadequate and suggested he lacked talent in painting. The rejection was a crushing blow to his self-esteem and would influence his worldview in the years to come. Despite this setback, Hitler remained in Vienna from 1908 to 1913. These were difficult years characterized by poverty and instability. He lived in homeless shelters and men's hostels, earning meager income by painting postcards and advertisements. He survived on an orphan's pension and occasional support from his family. During this period, Hitler became increasingly bitter and began developing his extreme political views. Vienna at the turn of the 20th century was a cosmopolitan city with a diverse population, but it was also a place where anti-Semitic and nationalist movements were gaining strength. The city's mayor, Karl Lueger, was an outspoken anti-Semite whose rhetoric influenced young Hitler. The political pamphlets and newspapers Hitler consumed during this time reinforced prejudices and conspiracy theories. It was in Vienna that Hitler began to develop his racist ideology. He became obsessed with ideas about racial purity and the superiority of the Aryan race. He blamed Jews for Germany's and Austria's problems, absorbing the anti-Semitic propaganda that was widespread in certain circles. He also developed a deep hatred for Marxism and communism, which he associated with Jewish influence. The contrast between his own poverty and the apparent success of some Jewish businessmen and intellectuals fueled his resentment. Hitler's failure to achieve his artistic dreams, combined with his experiences in Vienna's multi-ethnic environment, shaped his toxic worldview. He began to see the world through the lens of racial struggle and conspiracy. In 1913, Hitler moved to Munich, Germany, partly to avoid military service in the Austro-Hungarian army. However, when World War I broke out in August 1914, he volunteered for the German army. Hitler found purpose and camaraderie in military service. He served as a dispatch runner, carrying messages between command posts, a dangerous role that earned him several decorations, including the Iron Cross First Class, a rare honor for a corporal. Hitler's fellow soldiers remembered him as a peculiar individual who was fanatically devoted to Germany, despite not being a German citizen by birth. He had few close friends and spent much of his free time reading or drawing. The war gave Hitler a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he felt part of something larger than himself. The German surrender in November 1918 devastated Hitler. Like many German soldiers and nationalists, he believed in the stab-in-the-back myth, the false claim that Germany had not been defeated militarily but had been betrayed by politicians, particularly socialists and Jews, who had surrendered unnecessarily. This belief would become central to Nazi propaganda and Hitler's political rhetoric. After the war, Hitler remained in the army and was assigned to work as an intelligence agent in Munich. His duties included monitoring political organizations that the military considered potentially subversive. In September 1919, he was sent to observe a small group called the German Workers' Party, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or DAP. Instead of merely observing, Hitler joined the party and quickly became one of its most effective speakers. Hitler discovered he possessed a remarkable talent for public speaking. He could captivate audiences with his passionate rhetoric, dramatic gestures, and ability to tap into people's fears and resentments. His speeches blamed Germany's defeat and economic problems on the Treaty of Versailles, which had imposed harsh terms on Germany after World War I, and on internal enemies, particularly Jews and communists. By 1920, the party had been renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or NSDAP. Commonly known as the Nazi Party, Hitler became its leader in 1921. He introduced the swastika symbol and the stiff-armed salute that would become synonymous with Nazism. The party's platform combined extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, anti-communism, and promises to restore Germany's greatness. In November 1923, Hitler and the Nazis attempted to seize power through a coup known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The plan was to overthrow the Bavarian government in Munich and then march on Berlin. However, the coup was poorly organized and quickly crushed by police. 16 Nazis and 4 police officers died in the confrontation. Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. The trial in 1924 gave Hitler a national platform to spread his ideas. Rather than appearing defeated, he used the courtroom to deliver propaganda speeches that were widely reported in newspapers. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison but would serve less than 1 year due to political pressure and sympathetic judges. During his imprisonment at Landsberg prison, Hitler dictated his political manifesto, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, to his deputy Rudolf Hess. The book outlined his ideology, including his racist beliefs, his hatred of Jews and communists, his contempt for democracy, and his vision for German expansion. Though poorly written and rambling, Mein Kampf would eventually become required reading in Nazi Germany and sell millions of copies, making Hitler wealthy. After his release from prison in December 1924, Hitler rebuilt the Nazi Party. He learned from the failed putsch that he would need to gain power through legal means, exploiting the democratic system to destroy it from within. Throughout the late 1920s, the Nazi Party remained relatively small and marginal in German politics. The turning point came with the Great Depression, which began in 1929. Economic catastrophe struck Germany particularly hard. Unemployment soared, businesses collapsed, and millions faced poverty and desperation. The Weimar Republic's democratic government seemed unable to solve the crisis. In this atmosphere of fear and chaos, extremist parties on both the left and right gained support. Hitler and the Nazis capitalized on this instability. They promised to restore order, rebuild the economy, make Germany powerful again, and provide scapegoats for the nation's problems. Hitler's speeches drew enormous crowds. The Nazi Party's private army, the SA, Sturmabteilung or stormtroopers, intimidated opponents and fought street battles with communists, creating an atmosphere of violence that made Hitler seem like the only leader strong enough to restore order. In the parliamentary elections of 1932, the Nazi Party became the largest party in the Reichstag, German parliament, though it did not win a majority. Through backroom political maneuvering and pressure from conservative politicians who thought they could control him, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany on January 30th, 1933. It was a fatal miscalculation by his conservative allies who believed Hitler could be manipulated and constrained. Once in power, Hitler moved quickly to eliminate all opposition and transform Germany into a totalitarian dictatorship. In February 1933, the Reichstag building burned down in suspicious circumstances. Hitler blamed communists for the fire and used it as a pretext to suspend civil liberties and arrest political opponents. The Reichstag fire decree gave the government emergency powers that Hitler never relinquished. In March 1933, Hitler pressured Parliament to pass the Enabling Act, which gave him the power to enact laws without parliamentary approval. This effectively ended democracy in Germany. Over the following months, Hitler banned all political parties except the Nazis, dissolved labor unions, and brought all organizations under Nazi control through a process called Gleichschaltung, coordination. The night of June 30th, 1934, known as the Night of the Long Knives, saw Hitler purge the SA leadership and other potential rivals. Ernst Röhm, the SA leader who had been Hitler's early ally, was murdered along with dozens of others. This consolidation removed potential threats from within the party and reassured the army, which viewed the SA as a rival. When President Paul von Hindenburg died in August 1934, Hitler merged the positions of Chancellor and President, becoming the absolute leader, or Führer, of Germany. All members of the armed forces swore a personal oath of loyalty to Hitler himself, not to Germany or its constitution. Under Hitler's rule, Germany was transformed into a police state. The Gestapo, secret police, and the SS, Schutzstaffel, enforced Nazi ideology through terror and intimidation. People could be arrested and imprisoned without trial in concentration camps. Freedom of speech, press, and assembly were eliminated. Propaganda controlled by Joseph Goebbels saturated every aspect of German life. Hitler's racist policies were implemented with bureaucratic efficiency. Jews were systematically stripped of their rights through the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which defined Jews by ancestry and prohibited marriage and relations between Jews and Aryans. Jews were excluded from professions, their businesses were boycotted or confiscated, and they faced increasing violence and humiliation. The persecution escalated in November 1938 with Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, when Nazi mobs destroyed Jewish synagogues, businesses, and homes throughout Germany and Austria. Approximately 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. This marked a significant escalation in the systematic persecution of Jews. Hitler also targeted other groups deemed undesirable or threats to his vision of racial purity. People with disabilities were murdered in the T4 euthanasia program. Roma and Sinti people, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, political dissidents, and others were persecuted, imprisoned, and killed. From the beginning of his rule, Hitler planned for war and territorial expansion. He believed that Germany needed Lebensraum, living space, in Eastern Europe, and that war was inevitable and desirable. He began secretly rebuilding Germany's military in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. In 1935, he openly announced the existence of the German Air Force and reintroduced military conscription. Hitler tested the will of Britain and France through a series of aggressive moves. In 1936, German troops reoccupied the Rhineland, which had been demilitarized under the treaty. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria in the Anschluss. Later that year, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia, claiming he wanted to protect ethnic Germans living there. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain pursued a policy of appeasement, hoping to avoid war by meeting Hitler's demands. At the Munich Conference in September 1938, Britain and France agreed to let Germany take the Sudetenland. Chamberlain returned to Britain claiming he had achieved peace for our time. However, appeasement only emboldened Hitler. In March 1939, Germany occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland and World War II began. Britain and France finally declared war on Germany. Poland was quickly conquered through blitzkrieg, lightning war, tactics combining rapid tank movements with air support. Over the next year, Germany conquered Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. By June 1940, Germany dominated Western Europe, and Hitler was at the height of his power. Hitler expected Britain to surrender or seek peace, but under Winston Churchill's leadership, Britain fought on alone. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies over England in 1940, was Germany's first major defeat. Unable to achieve air superiority, Hitler postponed and eventually canceled his plans to invade Britain. In June 1941, Hitler made what many historians consider his greatest strategic blunder. He invaded the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. Hitler had always intended to destroy communism and seize Soviet territory for German colonization. Initially, German forces advanced rapidly and seemed unstoppable. However, they were ultimately stopped by fierce Soviet resistance, the harsh Russian winter, and overextended supply lines. Germany's invasion brought the Soviet Union into the war as an allied power alongside Britain. Then, in December 1941, Hitler declared war on the United States following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Germany now faced a coalition of the world's most powerful nations: the Soviet Union, the United States, and the British Empire. The Holocaust was the systematic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. While anti-Semitic persecution had begun immediately after Hitler took power, the genocide escalated during World War II. As German forces conquered Eastern Europe, they encountered large Jewish populations in Poland and the Soviet Union. Special mobile killing squads called Einsatzgruppen followed the German army into Soviet territory, massacring Jews, Roma, and others. At the Wannsee Conference in January 1942, Nazi officials coordinated what they called the final solution to the Jewish question: the complete extermination of European Jews. Death camps were established at Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, and other locations. Jews were rounded up from across Nazi-occupied Europe, transported in cattle cars to these camps, and murdered in gas chambers. Those not immediately killed were worked to death as slave laborers or subjected to horrific medical experiments. The Holocaust represented industrialized genocide on an unprecedented scale, demonstrating how modern state apparatus could be used for evil purposes. Hitler was directly responsible for ordering and overseeing the Holocaust. While he often avoided signing explicit orders, leaving implementation to subordinates like Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Eichmann, the genocide reflected his worldview and objectives. The Holocaust stands as one of history's greatest crimes against humanity. From 1942 onward, Germany's military situation deteriorated. The Soviets won a crucial victory at Stalingrad in early 1943, beginning the long push westward. Allied forces invaded North Africa, then Sicily and Italy. In June 1944, American and British forces landed in Normandy, opening a Western front. Germany faced a two-front war it could not win. As defeat became inevitable, Hitler refused to consider surrender or compromise. He ordered total war and demanded fanatical resistance. German cities were reduced to rubble by Allied bombing. Millions of German soldiers and civilians died in the war's final year because Hitler refused to accept defeat. Hitler retreated increasingly into a fantasy world in his underground bunker in Berlin. He blamed others for Germany's failures: his generals, the German people, everyone but himself. He issued impossible orders to non-existent armies. His health declined due to stress, poor diet, and reliance on injections from his personal physician, which likely contained methamphetamine and other drugs. By April 1945, Soviet forces were fighting through the streets of Berlin. Hitler remained in his Führer bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, surrounded by a small group of loyalists. He married his longtime companion, Eva Braun, in a brief civil ceremony on April 29th. In his final testament, Hitler blamed Jews for the war and urged Germans to continue fighting. On April 30th, 1945, as Soviet troops closed in, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Hitler shot himself while Braun took cyanide. Following Hitler's instructions, their bodies were carried outside, doused with gasoline, and burned. The remains were never fully cremated due to lack of fuel and time. Soviet troops later recovered the partially burned bodies. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 7th to 8th, 1945, ending World War II in Europe. The full extent of Nazi crimes was revealed as Allied forces liberated concentration camps and occupied German territory. The Nuremberg trials held Nazi leaders accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Adolf Hitler's legacy is one of unprecedented destruction and evil. World War II resulted in approximately 70 to 85 million deaths, including around 40 million European civilians. The Holocaust murdered 6 million Jews, along with millions of others deemed undesirable. Entire cities were destroyed. Families were torn apart. The trauma affected generations. Hitler's actions changed the world fundamentally. They led to the creation of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and international laws against genocide and war crimes. The phrase, "never again," became a rallying cry to prevent similar atrocities. Germany itself underwent decades of reflection and reconciliation, becoming a strong democracy committed to human rights. Studying Hitler's rise to power teaches important lessons about the fragility of democratic institutions, the dangers of demagoguery, the power of propaganda, and the consequences of prejudice and scapegoating. His success depended on economic crisis, political instability, effective use of modern media, exploitation of fears and resentments, and the failure of democratic institutions and leaders to stop him.